Hello, you. You're listening to A History of Italy. Recap number 8, episodes 161 to 183.
Non posso più accucciarmi e così ritorno su. Lascio i colli nelle valli, tra due salici piangenti. Io ritrovo la speranza di un amore che ormai fu.
Well, the time has come once again to do a little bit of a recap. We've done just over 20 episodes and gotten comfortably out of the 1400s, said goodbye to the Borgias, and so on. So it's time to look back a little bit and revise. Remember, there are other 7 recaps, so if you are just joining the podcast and want to get a general idea without listening through the hours and hours of 183 episodes, you can use the recaps. Also, before we begin, remember that the Regional Italy episodes are out. If you've ever thought of supporting the show and not have the opportunity, it would be a great help if you also listen to the Regional Italy episodes. There's plenty of interesting content, if I say so myself, and you can help get the numbers up and show our friendly sponsors that it's worth supporting the show. Thank you very much. So starting from episode 161, we outlined the political and military tensions leading up to the Italian Wars beginning in 1494. The key elements included the changing Italian balance of power. So by the 15th century, Italy's political scene was dominated by 5 major players: Venice, Milan, Florence, the Papal States, and Naples. A balance of power was established by the Peace of Lodi in 1454 and maintained relative stability, though smaller conflicts persisted. The death of Lorenzo the Magnificent in 1492 disrupted the delicate diplomacy he maintained. His successor, Piero de' Medici, aligned Florence with Naples, alarming Milan and Venice. Ludovico Sforza, known as Il Moro, the de facto ruler of Milan, feared a coalition against him and sought support from France. Charles VIII of France, eager to prove himself and reclaim the throne of Naples based on his historical claims to the Anjou, was encouraged by Il Moro to intervene. This was also a strategy by Milan to distract from the French Duke of Orleans' claim to Milan itself. King Ferrante of Naples died in January of 1494, succeeded by his son Alphonse II. King Charles, asserting his claim to Naples, sought the Pope's recognition, but was denied. Preparations for war ensued. Milan allied with France, while Naples aligned with the Pope, Rodrigo Borgia, Alexander VI. Venice stayed neutral, and Florence stayed on the fence a little bit. On August 26, 1494, Charles VIII marched from Grenoble with a large army, marking the start of the Italian Wars. Initial skirmishes saw the Neapolitans defeated, also seeing the start of the brutal French military reputation. Charles entered Tuscany, where Piero de' Medici surrendered key fortresses without authority. This act led to the Medici's expulsion from Florence, marking the end of their rule, at least for the time being. Meanwhile, Charles's arrival in Pisa sparked a revolt against Florentine control, declaring the Second Pisan Republic, though French support for Pisa would prove unreliable. Negotiations in Florence between Charles and the city's new leadership, led by Pier Capponi, concluded with the French gaining port cities and avoiding a siege. Florence then began restructuring its government, influenced by the friar Savonarola, who would soon play a pivotal role in the city's history. So, with episode 163, we stop to take a look at the life of Girolamo Savonarola, who was born in 1452 and died in 1498, rather horribly. He was born in Ferrara to a noble family, but he chose a monastic life after a series of personal disappointments, becoming a Dominican monk, known for his fiery sermons against corruption and immorality, particularly in the church. After a failed first stint in Florence in 1481, Savonarola returned in 1490 at Lorenzo de' Medici's invitation. His intense rhetoric and prophecies gained a following, In 1491, he became the prior of the San Marco monastery, refusing to pay homage to Lorenzo, signaling his opposition. Following Lorenzo's death and the Medici expulsion in 1494, Savonarola's influence peaked. He restructured Florence into a theocratic republic, promoting austerity, anti-corruption measures, and social reforms. He organized the famous Bonfire of the Vanities in 1497, burning items deemed sinful. Savonarola's criticism of Pope Alexander VI led to his excommunication in that same year. Undeterred, he continued his sermons, escalating tensions with the Church and Florentine factions. Opposition from groups like the Arrabbiati grew. After failed challenges, including a botched trial by fire in 1498, he was arrested, tortured, and executed by hanging and burning. Having seen the unpleasant end of Savonarola, we rush back in time to catch up with Charles, who after Tuscany was now heading for Rome. Despite initial tensions, the king and the pope reached a settlement, allowing Charles to continue his campaign. Alexander offered his son Cesare as a hostage, though Cesare soon escaped. This prompted us yet again to leave Charles waiting to trace the rise of the Borgias. So we started with Alfonso Borgia, Rodrigo's uncle, who had come to Rome in 1444 with the Spanish king Alphonse. Alphonse Borgia became Pope Callistus III and elevated Rodrigo to cardinal, despite his youth and lack of qualifications. Rodrigo was a skilled administrator and amassed immense wealth, influence, and a controversial reputation for his indulgent lifestyle and his love of the ladies. He fathered multiple children, including Cesare, Giovanni, Lucrezia, and Goffredo, with his lover Vannozza Cattanei, whose role diminished after 1483. Following the deaths of Lorenzo the Medici and Pope Innocent VIII, Rodrigo Borgia secured the papacy as Alexander VI, after prolonged negotiations and alleged bribery involving gifts of gold to his rival Ascanio Sforza. Rodrigo Borgia swiftly took charge as both the spiritual leader of the church and temporal ruler of the Papal States. He had to navigate internal power struggles in Rome, maintain control over local lords, and counterbalance international threats from France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire. Alexander sought to strengthen his family's power through strategic marriages. Cesare, under orders from his father, initially pursued a church career, but resented it. Giovanni was poised to establish a Borgia dynasty, but failed militarily and was mysteriously murdered. Lucrezia was initially used in political alliances, but was later known as a competent duchess, and Geoffrey was married off to bolster alliances with Naples. Cesare, a master strategist, gradually emerged as the family's power broker after Giovanni's death. He took bold steps to consolidate power, employing the motto, Caesar or nothing. The Borgias were often accused of murder, corruption, and scandal, but they were also a close-knit family whose reputation was amplified by their enemies. Once we had settled the Borgias in their position of power, we once again caught up with King Charles as he continued his campaign in Italy, leaving behind a trail of destruction as his army advanced. In Naples, King Alphonse II was overwhelmed by rebellions and, lacking support, he abdicated, fleeing to Sicily with his royal treasures. His son, Ferdinand II, Ferrandino, struggled to rally support against Charles, who entered Naples on February 22, 1495, to a surprisingly warm reception. However, local resentment towards French officials soon grew. Charles faced mounting oppositions as key powers, including Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, Venice, Milan, and the Pope, formed the League of Venice to counter his influence. Ludovico Sforza, Duke of Milan, joined due to fears stemming from French claims on Milan via Valentina Visconti's lineage. As tensions escalated, Charles left Naples in May 1495, appointing a viceroy. Ludovico Sforza, initially weakened by internal challenges and illness, regained control with help from his wife, Beatrice d'Este, or his wife did everything for him, really. She led the troops to repel French advances and laid siege to Novara, ultimately forcing the French to retreat after months of disease and setbacks. Meanwhile, in the south, King Ferdinand of Naples, with Spanish General Gonzalo de Cordova, regained Naples by July 1495 after the French had withdrawn. Charles faced the Holy League's forces led by Francesco II Gonzaga near Fornovo in the province of Parma. The battle ended inconclusively. The French escaped north, but they lost their supplies and treasure, including the precious possessions of Charles. The League suffered great casualties, but claimed a symbolic victory for having maintained their position on the field. Charles returned to France, while League forces continued to clean up French resistance in southern Italy. The French governor of Naples surrendered in 1496, marking the end of France's initial Italian campaign. Charles VIII died in 1498 after an accidental head injury. His death ended the elder Valois line, and Louis II, Duke of Orleans, succeeded him as Louis XII. He inherited claims to Milan, setting the stage for further conflicts with Ludovico Sforza. Meanwhile, Cesare Borgia abandoned his cardinalate in 1498, gaining favour with France's new king Louis XII, and returned to Italy as Duke of Valentinois, which gave him the Italian name Il Valentino, with plans to establish his own duchy. His strategy involved conquering territories in central Italy, targeting regions within the Papal States, like Romagna, controlled by independent nobles. After the first round of the Italian Wars, we took a little trip round to look at the aftermath. In Florence, after Girolamo Savonarola's fall, we saw the new rise of Pier Soderini as Gonfaloniere and the appointment of Niccolò Machiavelli as secretary. Florence struggled to regain Pisa and defend Livorno from external powers, including the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian. We then went on a little bit of a tangent to talk about Amerigo Vespucci, a Florentine navigator and cartographer credited with proving the existence of a so-called New World and it being named after him. We spoke a little bit about the decline of Genova, the minor role that Savoy had played in the Italian Wars, and Milan's challenges under Ludovico il Moro, which included the death of his beloved wife, Beatrice d'Este, and of course the ever-present claim of French King Louis XII to the throne of the Duchy of Milan. Venice's activities included the involvement in the League of Venice, defending Pisa, expanding its terraferma, the dry land empire, combating the Turks, and competition from Portuguese trade. Despite internal conflicts and economic strain, Venice remained a significant power in Italy and in Europe. After having mentioned the Battle of Fornovo and the leadership of Francesco Gonzaga, we went for a little trip to the Gonzaga city, Mantova, whose geographical uniqueness with its surrounding lakes and the genius of medieval architect Alberto Pitentino transforming the city into an almost impregnable fortress. And we also saw the legend of Manto, the prophetess who had cried the lakes into existence. Then, of course, Mantua is the city of the poet Virgil. We trace the Gonzaga's rise from their roots as the Corradi family, does that ring a bell to anyone, to becoming one of Italy's most enduring dynasties. Their ability to survive and thrive among the ever-shifting political landscape of medieval and Renaissance Italy was really impressive, balancing alliances with powers like Milan, Venice, and the papacy, while still finding time to nurture the Renaissance with artistic greats like Mantegna. We also spoke a little bit about Mantegna and his quirks and refusal to idealize his patrons. Then, of course, we focused on Francesco II Gonzaga, the hero of Fornovo, and a PR genius. We added the interesting note of him retrieving Charles VIII's baggage train and gallantly returning the king's helmet, but holding on to the royal porn collection. To set up the campaign of Cesare Borgia in Romagna, we went to Forlì to visit with the formidable Tigress, Caterina Sforza, born in 1463. She was the illegitimate daughter of the Duke of Milan, Galeazzo Maria Sforza, and was raised amid Milanese court luxury. Her grandmother, Bianca Maria Visconti, influenced her with a pride in her family's warrior legacy. At the age of 10, she was forced into a politically motivated marriage with Girolamo Riario, nephew of the then Pope Sixtus IV. Caterina's early years as Lady of Forlì and Imola were marked by her husband's political ambitions and constant unrest. While excluded from direct politics, Caterina built alliances through charm and social connections. After Pope Sixtus IV's death, their fortunes waned, and Girolamo struggled to maintain control. Caterina became increasingly influential, managing crises, suppressing revolts, and even administering punishments. In 1488, Girolamo was assassinated in a conspiracy led by local nobles. Caterina, briefly captured, displayed remarkable resilience, and when the nobles even threatened to kill her children if she did not give up the fortress of Ravaldino she was supposed to have grabbed her lady parts and uttered the phrase, "Do it then, hang them all. I have here the mold to make more," which she may have never actually said, but it sounded really cool. At this point, she began a new passionate relationship with a man by the name of Giacomo Feo, brother of Tommaso the Castellan of the fortress of Ravaldino. A child would come from this relationship, Bernardino. They even got secretly married. To make a long story short, Caterina managed to survive the descent of Charles with the Neapolitan and French troops on her doorstep, and was very pleased to see the backs of both armies when they finally left. She managed to walk a very dangerous tightrope. Her lover and then husband Feo was assassinated, and that is when she saw terrible, terrible retribution, putting a serious strain on the relationship with her people. A famine in 1496 hit Forlì, but also Florence, and they sent a representative to Caterina to ask for help. This was Giovanni de' Medici, who started up a relationship with Caterina. From that relationship came a son, Giovanni dalle Bande Nere, who would be father of the Duke of Tuscany, Cosimo I. The Borgias started to show great interest in her affairs, and she wondered why that was. As we know, after the death of King Charles VIII of France in 1498, his cousin, Louis of Orléans, ascended to the throne as King Louis XII. Louis claimed the Duchy of Milan through his grandmother Valentina Visconti and aimed to use Milan as a base for a subsequent invasion of Naples. Louis secured domestic stability by marrying Anne of Brittany and annulled his previous marriage with the Pope's assistance, promising the Borgias support in return. The campaign began in 1499, led by Gian Giacomo Trivulzio. Despite Ludovico's attempt to defend Milan, including help from Caterina Sforza and others, his efforts were undermined by internal unrest, heavy taxation, and poor leadership. The French and their Venetian allies swiftly advanced, and Milan's citizens, disillusioned with Ludovico, offered little resistance. On September 2nd, Ludovico fled Milan to seek help from Emperor Maximilian. By October, Louis XII entered Milan, met with limited enthusiasm, and established control. Meanwhile, the power of the Borgias grew, and it was becoming perilous for wealthy nobles due to schemes of false accusations, imprisonment, and confiscations. And cracks started to show. Cesare's intolerance for criticism contrasted with the Pope's leniency. Cesare began to carve out his duchy in Romagna, targeting cities like Caterina's Forlì, Imola, and Rimini, areas which were historically part of the Papal States. Imola fell with little resistance, and Forlì, under Caterina Sforza, held out until betrayal led to her capture. Cesare's reputation grew, though rumors about his personal life persisted. His campaign faced delays as French forces were recalled to Milan to confront Ludovico Sforza's attempt to reclaim his duchy. Indeed, in 1500, Milan was in turmoil. The French occupation faced resistance from locals, worsened by heavy taxes and strict regulations. The pro-French nobles retreated, and French troops began losing control. This created an opening for exiled Duke Ludovico Sforza to attempt a comeback. Sforza assembled a mercenary army with Swiss, Burgundian, and German troops and returned to Italy in January 1500. He retook Milan in February, but managing the restless mercenaries proved very difficult. To keep them occupied, Sforza targeted cities like Vigevano and Novara, recapturing Novara by April. However, French forces regrouped and besieged Novara. Sforza's mercenary army faltered as Swiss soldiers on both sides negotiated. Ultimately, Sforza was captured while attempting to escape in disguise. His brother Cardinal Ascanio Sforza was also caught, but later released due to his church connection. The French reasserted control over Milan, imposing harsh punishments and heavy reparations on the city and surrounding areas. Despite resistance, Milan remained under foreign rule for the next 350 years until the Italian unification. Ludovico Sforza spent his remaining years in French captivity, growing depressed and attempting escape. He died in 1508, eventually buried beside his wife Beatrice in Milan. His downfall marked another step in Italy's fragmentation under foreign powers. We then headed back to follow Cesare Borgia's continuing campaigns. With the financial backing of Daddy Pope Alexander VI, he embarked on a new military campaign to expand his duchy in the Romagna region. He targeted Pesaro, ruled by Giovanni Sforza, Lucrezia Borgia's former husband. Giovanni fled, allowing Cesare to take Pesaro with minimal resistance in October 1500. Cesare also captured Rimini from Pandolfo IV Malatesta, who surrendered without much resistance. The ease of these victories suggests that many citizens welcomed the change given their dissatisfaction with their local lords. Unlike other cities, Faenza resisted Cesare's forces due to their loyalty to their young lord Astorre Manfredi. After a 6-month siege, Faenza surrendered in April 1501. Astorre was imprisoned and later murdered. Cesare aimed to expand even further, including taking Bologna, but was stopped by French King Louis XII, who wanted to maintain a buffer zone between his territories and Cesare's growing duchy. Cesare was ultimately declared Duke of Romagna by his father. A key figure in Cesare's campaigns, Vitellozzo Vitelli, was driven by a vengeance against Florence and joined Cesare after his brother's execution by the Florentines. Vitellozzo played a pivotal role in Cesare's military operations, but harbored personal ambitions and animosities. Meanwhile, the French and Spanish created the secret Treaty of Granada, in which France's Louis XII and Spain's Ferdinand of Aragon secretly agreed to divide up the kingdom of Naples between them. That kingdom faced a bleak period, with both France and Spain collaborating to divide its territory. French and Spanish armies advanced, with French bombardment under the command of Cesare Borgia leading to the fall of Capua in July 1501, followed by Naples itself. King Federico fled to Ischia and later lived in exile in France. Meanwhile, internal divisions and disputes over territory and revenue between the French and Spanish destabilized the region. Skirmishes escalated to open conflict, and the Spanish general Gonzalo de Córdoba, El Gran Capitán, began to turn the tide in Spain's favor after initial French successes. Key victories included the Battle of Cerignola, and the conflict culminated in the Spanish victory at the Battle of Garigliano in 1503. Naples came under Spanish control, where it remained for over 2 centuries. We went on a quick digression during this period to talk about the Challenge of Barletta that occurred during the campaign, a duel of honor in 1503 between 13 Italian knights and 13 French knights, taking place in Puglia. The event was sparked by a French insult to Italian honor, and organized with strict rules and high stakes, led by Ettore Fieramosca, the Capuan. The Italians triumphed after a fierce battle, demonstrating courage and skill. The event became a symbol of Italian pride and identity, especially during the period of foreign domination. The victory highlighted a certain sense of Italian cultural unity, even though political unification would not come for centuries. The last few episodes of this section concentrated on the peak and fall of Cesare Borgia, who, after surviving an assassination attempt in 1501, focused on organizing and consolidating his territories. He established efficient governance systems and brought temporary peace to his cities, despite resistance from factions like the College of Cardinals. Cesare's movements were calculated and enigmatic, keeping allies and enemies uncertain of his plans. He delegated government to trusted individuals like Ramiro de Lorca, whose ruthlessness reflected Cesare's political methods. Meanwhile, his captains, particularly Vitellozzo Vitelli, pursued personal vendettas, creating tensions with Florence and King Louis XII of France. Cesare expanded his duchy by seizing territories like Piombino, Urbino, and Camerino. After using deception and treachery, his capture of Urbino in particular demonstrated his opportunism, as he looted the city and claimed its treasures. His growing power and the audacity of his actions alarmed small local lords, including his captains, leading to whispers of an anti-Borgia league. Despite potential opposition, Cesare's charm and political acumen secured King Louis XII's favor, allowing him to continue with his conquests while maintaining control of Rome alongside his father, Pope Alexander VI. By 1502, Cesare was at the height of his power, having established one of Italy's largest and most formidable duchies. As 1502 drew to a close, his rule faced resistance from rebellious captains and local lords who conspired against him. However, the conspirators' unity soon faltered due to internal disagreements. Cesare, calm and strategic, managed to exploit divisions and restore order in December 1502. He quelled unrest in Cesena by executing his corrupt governor, Ramiro de Lorca, publicly, this pacifying the population. Later, Cesare targeted Senigallia, a port city. While initially welcoming back his betrayed captains, Cesare lured them into a trap. During a New Year's Eve banquet, he had his captains captured, and later some of them would be strangled. This ruthless move, rather than being condemned, was actually widely applauded, even by King Louis XII, who compared Cesare to an ancient Roman hero. Cesare's power and legend grew even further, but his successes depended on the continued support of his father, Pope Alexander VI, whose health was crucial in his future. He captured more key cities like Assisi and Perugia, but his ambitions were checked by King Louis of France and other rivals. Despite conflicts with his father, Pope Alexander VI, Cesare pushed for reforms and expanded his influence. However, his fortunes declined after Alexander's death in 1503, which left Cesare ill and politically vulnerable. His power unraveled as cities rebelled and allies, including France, abandoned him. He failed to consolidate his power in Romagna and mistakenly trusted his enemy Giuliano della Rovere, who became Pope Julius II and turned against him. Cesare was sent to Spain, where he was imprisoned, but managed to escape and eventually sought refuge in Navarre, where he was asked by his brother-in-law, the King of Navarre, to help put down a rebellion. He met his end in 1507 while leading attack during a siege. He was separated from his troops and fatally wounded after a fierce fight. His death marked the fall of the Borgias' power, though their legacy lingered. Cesare Borgia, once feared and admired, was no more, and the Borgia dynasty never regained its former influence. So that brought us up to episode 183 and the end of the 1400s. We still have loads to cover, so stick with us. I actually completely forgot our podcasting anniversary. We've been at it now for 7 years, and it'll be at least another 7 before we get to the end of things. So, my dear constant listener, stick with us. Thank you very, very much for listening, as always. I would in particular like to thank my wonderful Patreon supporters, starting from the first half of the Margherita Hack and Galileo Galilei level, and they are Alison H., Amanda D., Annie, Benjamin W., Karsten, Catherine C., C-Lane, Cindy M., Chris H., Cospia Fanboy, Dean V., Demetrio M., Dennis K., Dennis S., Dominique T., Edward J., Emily B., Eric W., Federica R., Gabriel S., Gunnar W., Heather M., Ignazio Il Valentino, Jane T., and Jeff M. And of course, we cannot forget the tippy top Maria Montessori and Dante Alighieri level Lisa K., Andrew M., Peter W., David L., David C., Sen, David A., Karen D., Helenka, Brigid, Dallas, Joseph V., Stephen G., and Julian. Thank you, one and all. If, like them, you'd like to have access to ad-free episodes and extra content, you can do so by going to ahistoryofitaly.com, clicking to the support page, and then on the Patreon support button. Or you could become a PayPal supporter, just like our good friend Karen. Thank you very much, Karen, for your recurring contribution. If you'd like just to get in touch, please feel more than welcome to do so. Hello at historyofitaly.com, or get a hold of us on social media. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Remember also, if you're thinking of supporting the show, it's enough to go and listen to the regional Italy episodes. We're out with Veneto at the moment, on the same feed as the main show, so give that a listen. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and until next time, arrivederci.